everyone, this is Singularity Watch, the show where we take a good look at all the possible tomorrows so that we can plan ahead and build a better today. I'm Ollie, and as always, my co-host is award-winning cybersecurity professional Kavya Perlman, founder of the XR Safety Initiative, which is XRSI. Hi, Kavya.
Hey, Ollie.
Our guest today is Valentino Megale, a biologist with a PhD in neuropharmacology and a tech entrepreneur as the CEO at Softcare Studios, focused on digital health and mental well-being. Hi, Valentino. Thank you enormously for being here today. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Kavya. Hello, Oliver.
Your career started in academia, researching in pharmacology, organic chemistry, and molecular biology in the fields of oncology and neuronal metabolism. Then at a certain point, your journey crossed and went into VR. So how did that happen exactly? How did you get into VR?
That's correct. That's correct. So basically, I started in the classical wet lab, synthesizing drugs with pharmaceutical activity. And then after my PhD, which was focused on neuropharmacology, I decided to explore how digital technologies can support patients and improve their therapy experience without the use of drugs. So that was the moment where, with our team, with my co-founders, we also started to deep our knowledge in virtual reality, because this represents the perfect tool to address the neglected needs of patients without the administration of the traditional pharmaceutical compounds.
Okay, so it became something. It was born from the fact of trying to not go the drug way. So I don't know how you say that in kind of technical terms. But
Exactly. That is at the early beginning of our company of Softcare Studios. We founded Softcare Studios in 2017 in Rome. 1 year before, with my colleagues, we have been challenged by the pharma company Merck during a call for projects, how we can improve patients' experience and patients' adherence to therapy with digital technologies. So we are a team of medical researchers. I'm from neuropharmacology. There are other guys from biomedical engineering and software development. They always faced how to use technology in healthcare. And we have been a perfect mix to understand, yes, let's start to use digital instead of the pill, and support patients to do better their patient's journey through hospitalization and towards better health outcomes. We are 5 co-founders. We are very distributed in every part of Italy. We have people in many cities. We have even one co-founder in London right now. So we are natively digital nomads before 2020.
So can you just elaborate a little bit on kind of the types of needs you're responding to? In a little bit more specifically, to give us an idea of what type of people could maybe need this.
Sure. So at Softcare Studios, we decided to target at the very beginning pediatric patients and to address their neglected needs. As I said before, during patients' journey, there are a lot of neglected needs that are linked to their experience, like pain perception, clinical anxiety, even social isolation. So these all conditions have a huge impact on how patients deal with their daily challenges. What are their attitudes towards the doctors and the hospitals? And so basically, these stress conditions are also a risky factor for pure adherence to therapy. So if patients experience pain, anxiety, and isolation, they are more likely to be less adherent to therapy. So this is something that impairs the quality of life of patients, but also causes delays in the work routine of doctors. So providing a support, a solution, able to make patients more comfortable while playing the role of patients in the hospital. It helps them better feel, it improves their quality of life, but it also speeds up and facilitates the work of doctors. So this is a win-win solution that we decided to implement using immersive technology. Because
and it's also
all these stressful conditions depends from what space a patient is forced to stay in, but also how he spent his time in the space, in the hospitals. We don't like to be in the hospital, and we spend not exactly the time we'd like to spend in the hospitals. With virtual reality, we are able to change what space they perceive around them, and we provide a digital solution, a drug-free, not invasive solution to help them go beyond the walls of the hospitals with their mind, even if it is not possible to do that with their bodies. And that's a great value on the patient journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And seems like one of the things that is still really lacking in healthcare, right, is the kind of the soft aspect. So, bed manner and the kind of environment that people have, because it's kind of considered secondary to everything else, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's yes, exactly. It's perceived as secondary, but it's not secondary to the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And the patients would like to perceive less pain, less anxiety, and be less isolated, because it really helps. And it helps also the world hospitals to perform better and reach faster and better the health outcomes. So that's why we called ourselves Softcare.
I'm curious though, Valentino. So how have you stumbled upon, any research, or how do you decide? Because, for longer stay at the hospital, this could be a really lifesaver. You can't go anywhere, so you can just visit through VR any places, or, whatever doctors prescribe. But how many hours can a person really stay in VR? And especially, my key question here is, does it differ when it comes to surgical or, like a medical use case from like a traditional, I'm just playing VR game, I think?
Yes, obviously, we deal with patients, so they are not standard users. So they have a very specific profile of fragilities, of limitations on the motor side, on the sensory side, and cognitive side. So basically, it's very important to design spaces that fit in this fragility profile and that never stress too much this fragility profile. So there are spaces that respect the limitations of patients and these users. Obviously, when you play at home with your VR device, you can play all the time. You can play even till the end of your battery. That's up to you. But in case of the hospitals, we suggest and we discuss with doctors, with psychologists, that the best approach is to use virtual reality exactly when it can provide a meaningful value. So they don't use virtual reality more than half an hour, 40 minutes, and they use virtual reality exactly when the immersive distraction can provide a meaningful value to contrast anxiety, pain, and isolation. So it's something that should be administered to the end users and not just provided as an additional way to be to develop addiction to something digital. Okay, it's not just something to use your time, but to use your time better in specific moments. So, for instance, during chemotherapy, we are working also with young children in oncology. So our doctors and partner hospitals, they use virtual reality during chemotherapy, during blood tests, before scary treatment or after scary and painful treatment. So they use it with a purpose. And this is the main difference respect to the general consumer use virtual reality.
Great. Thank you for that. And Valentino, just for our audience, and especially for you, Ollie, let me clarify. Do not play your Oculus or any other headset or VR game until your battery dies. Just wanted to make sure.
Cool. And with regards to rehabilitation in VR, I'd like to kind of expand that a bit. As somebody who works in the field of rehabilitation myself, I've always interpreted the word rehabilitation. I can't say it. That's one thing about it.
Rehab.
Rehab.
That's why it's a rehab.
To indicate that we're, talking about giving back abilities. So in a sense that we're kind of teaching people to be independent and self-sufficient. That's the kind of idea that I have of it, although there are other kind of mindsets, right, which are more passive, perhaps. So do you think from the neurological and psychological point of view, there is an increase in effectiveness when you relearn skills, whether they're motor skills or emotional awareness or anything like this, all forms of rehabilitation? And is there any evidence on this yet?
I think that also from our research, from our network, rehabilitation is probably one of the base use cases we are, because it provides two kind of values, which is motivation on one side and data collection. Like Journal Agnes said, virtual reality is not only providing content, but it's first of all user tracking. So it's sensors, it's data. And that's great that you can virtualize a rehabilitation protocol, providing a space which is engaging and motivating for the user. And this is very important because rehabilitation is all about repetition of boring movement in time, probably in a boring space. So if you provide a space which is suitable for the user, they are more adherent to the rehabilitation protocol, and they reach better and faster goals of the rehabilitation process. But you can also monitor the motor performances of users and return this data to the specialist. So the specialist can have an additional and new tool to monitor even remotely the user during the rehabilitation process. It's great because you can provide better experience and study that experience from the inside. You can have objective data about that. And there are a lot of researchers, evidences that are working in this field. A particular application field is interesting when virtual reality is deployed to enhance the traditional rehabilitation even with exoskeletons. Exoskeletons are used to rehab the muscular movement of a person, but you are really not engaging the brain part of that process. People are just supported by the exoskeleton, but the brain just gets used to be dependent from an exoskeleton. So in a lot of researchers, they are connecting the exoskeleton use with the virtual reality applications that improve the whole process. It brings our ability to engage the whole person, body and mind at the same time. So that's great and that's effective.
So you've touched the point, upon 2 points. You've said data collection, which is already significant, and motivation, so compliance to the therapy. But another point I'm wondering about, which is probably harder to demonstrate, is whether let's say when you're playing and you're very motivated and immersed in a situation, whether it's in VR or outside, just in general, the idea of games, if that is going to improve the kind of memory retention and the quality of what you learn in some way. Do we have any evidence on that, or is that something you kind of have to research more?
There are interesting researches in this field because basically it's the best way to learn something is to learn it in first person. But it's not always possible to learn some new things in person, but you can simulate this in person condition, so with the immersive presence with virtual reality. So yes, there are emerging and growing evidences about the positive impact of virtual reality education for boosting memories, for relearning movements, and relearning spatial navigation, because this is very important. You can watch something on your 2D screen, but it's very different to navigate the space like we are here right now. I can speak with you, and the communication is more complex. You have meta language involved right now. This is something that provides more complexity and more value to the whole process. So I feel engaged, and I will remember this experience just like a real interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of a Zoom interview, like classical one.
There's a lot of work on phobias, right? How does that work in VR exactly?
That's probably one of the oldest application of VR together with pain management. Dr. Hunter Hoffman started the study in the 90s. And yes, basically, everything starts from the exposure therapy. You can overcome something that scares you just getting familiar with that something, approaching that in time with little steps towards closer and closer. Obviously, in reality, in our physical reality, this is also linked to risk. Just imagine to be scared by spiders. So you need to touch a spider, which can be a risk for you. But you can do the same, an exposure protocol in virtual reality with the perception of being in front of a realistic and real spider. And the interesting thing that Dr. Hoffman and the other researchers with him showed is that what you learn in virtual reality, that sense of being familiar with that thing, with that spider, for instance, can be moved into your daily life. So basically, if you are not scared by spiders in virtual reality, you are also less scared by spiders in your real physical reality. So that's great. You can do that at zero risk, and you can do that wherever you are. So it's a way also for therapists to deploy scalable solutions of exposure therapy for a lot more patients than in the past.
That's amazing. I can think of a few things that I should do.
As you talk about this, sort of exposure therapy and people using VR to then, expose you to some kind of a fear, potentially it can cure PTSD or at least mitigate PTSD, that kind of stuff as well. So I'm wondering, how critical is it to train people in a standardized manner, especially when we are talking about the kind of therapies that you're providing, and what should be the approach to then standardize such a training? Because you guys are researching and investigating, and then what happens when you have to scale up?
Yeah, I think that the best thing is when patients do not see technology. Technology should not be embedded. So basically, patients should enjoy the content and focus on the content. So it's really important to train patients about how to use general purpose virtual reality. This is useful because they should be not concerned with the usability, of the controller, of your headset, etc. This is something that should be invisible or less perceivable. They should be comfortable with the technology and then start with the content. So yes, the initial training is important for the patient in order to optimize the intervention, the virtual intervention. But this is very important also for doctors and health operators because they have a great responsibility in make patients open to use virtual reality. Because this is very important also for children, because if doctors are open to technology, the way they provide technology to children impacts how children perceive technology. They perceive it in a very difficult way, in a very complex way. Children who are patients and who are hospitalized, they don't want more complexity in their life. So yes, we always start from the training of the hospital personnel, and then we move to the training of the users. But it's very important to create an ecosystem that knows how to use technology.
How do patients react, to the use of VR, and not just VR, but in general, even before when people were using the for rehab, for example, the Nintendo Wii or the Microsoft Kinect. And in my experience, patients actually react really well, even really old patients. They don't seem to have much issue at all. And after a few times that they've tried it, they love it and they're absolutely cool with it. But the biggest kind of obstacle seems to actually be other therapists and other doctors, or even just parents, sons or daughters, who seem to somehow think that, because they're elderly people, then they shouldn't be kind of playing video games or dancing, stuff like that. How can this kind of be explained that, when somebody's old, they actually really want to do things that young people do just as much? They just have difficulty perhaps doing it. Have you come across this kind of attitude as well?
Yes, it reconnects to what we discussed before. We worked also with elder patients. We made a simulation of the MRI basically to help elder patients familiarize, get used to the MRI, do the real MRI test. And basically, everything starts from providing them a solution which is easy to use. So we designed, for instance, a content that can be controlled without the use of controllers, just with the eyesight. This is very important because if you give a controller to the child, he is a native digital user. So basically, he starts tinkering with all the elements, with all the controls, and he immediately understands how it works. It's not the same for elder users, so you need to take into consideration this one.
Yeah.
But yes, basically, there are some concerns. There are some people who are not convinced by virtual reality, but this does not depend only from technology. It's not only up to VR. That's also because, especially for mental health, we are not used to have and discuss about brain culture. Right. This is something that I often share with people. So basically, we know our bodies, we know how to improve our bodies, our physical one, and now also the avatars. We know that we can go to the gym and improve our performances. That's pretty clear to everyone. But we don't have the same perception for our brain. It works in a very similar way. Obviously, it changes our semantics, it changes the variables. But basically, we have not a static brain. Our brain is probably the most dynamic organ that we have, and we can train our brain, we can improve our skills, we can expand our skills. So when we go to the hospitals and say, hey, we can just target users' mind and brain to help them better experience therapy. This is a clear topic for psychologists, but not for everyone. That is the first great challenge. Hey, this is not only a gadget. This is a technology that is designed to engage the brain, and that matters because our mind has a significant impact in every recovery process, in every health condition. So, yes, working in VR is also working in neuroscience. You work and tell people that you can do a lot with your brain and with your mind, and that is possible. So, yes, that is the first step. Educate people about the power of the brain, and then technology. Technology is natural because you can train your brain also with an application, with your PC, etc., in different ways based on your goals. But brain is the first step, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems to me that maybe people, generally, if you look at also this period of the pandemic, when people can see the effects of what they're doing, or when they can see changes, they are more likely to believe they're true. When you can't see that you might have had an effect on somebody else's head, or you can't see your own, although there's, as you said, much more variability in the actual physical construction of the brain, still, you can't see it unless you kind of open up the head or something. But so that's probably one of the obstacles, I would imagine. So maybe it would be cool to have some way to be able to show people.
No, we had the opportunity to understand the impact on our brain of the pandemic during the lockdown. So during the lockdown, a lot of people say, hey, now it's clear to me for a virtual reality because I want to go beyond the walls of my home. And that was clear. So suddenly everyone understood, yes, stress is real. It's not just being very busy during the week. Stress is real, something that impairs our social relationship and our well-being, our productivity. And this is a condition that our patients hospitalized for months. It's normal, unfortunately, to them. But it was not normal for every one of us before the pandemic.
Before we move on to the next question, just a quick reminder to anyone following us. If you like what you're hearing, then please consider leaving us a like and maybe even a share. And we're already interested to hear any considerations you had while watching, so feel free to leave a comment. All right.
So, Valentino, I was wondering, when we started XR Safety Initiative, one of our senior advisors, Ibrahim Megale, shared his research with me where people could actually cause like cyber attack type of scenario and overlay things on top of what you are seeing in VR. And that was kind of the research, along with many novel cyber attacks that I went around the world and shared with a lot of people trying to create awareness around it. And now, while those novel attacks, cyber attacks, are not really there in the wild, but of course, these kinds of things are inevitably coming, these new type of risks, some unintended consequences that originate from just by nature. This is software, it's code, there are people involved, there's human in the loop. So I know it sounds like a very gigantic question, but in your opinion, how do we prepare ourselves for these unintended consequences or novel risks or even cybersecurity related risks? And so what are your thoughts, in the context of medical XR?
Yeah, so medical XR is still a niche. So probably that's why it has not been hit by huge or significant cyber attacks at the moment, because it's a niche. So it's very limited in its operation. So, but in time where the market will grow and the adoption of this technology will grow, probably it will become more and more interesting to hackers to hack inside, introduce uncurrent content or even dangerous content. So it's definitely a possibility. So in my opinion, I also joined the conversation at the XRSI for this reason, because it's important to start to discuss about it and to define what risk could be and how to assess them, how to develop countermeasures in time. Basically, like you said, a lot of people say, hey, there are no past examples of attacks, so we don't need to be concerned about it. That's not true, because we know that the best way is to anticipate the potential risk. So a professional conversation to anticipate the risk is fundamental. And probably we will learn a lot from the first attacks, because we will probably not be able to countermeasure them at the beginning. But yes, it's better than start completely from zero and without frameworks, because the XRSI is going to provide a framework that is public so everyone can access and understand what are the risks and maybe change its attitudes and behaviors towards technology.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you for contributing to this framework. What Valentino is referring to is XRSI is currently developing a XR privacy and safety framework for XR and spatial computing domain. So hopefully Valentino will get somewhere with our proactive measures and give to the industry some solutions around this. So thank you for being part of that.
Talking about the concept of illusion, right? So if we wanted to kind of define virtual reality, we could, in a very crude way, define it as an illusion, a sensory illusion, but nonetheless an illusion. But that makes us think of something that has no consequences on reality, like an illusion is something which is not really there. So in your field, this is clearly not the case, but what is actually being transferred from the virtual to the physical world? This is a kind of a bit of philosophical question, but it's still something that can be kind of interesting to ponder.
Yeah, it's very real. So virtual reality is an immersive illusion. It's based on an immersive illusion. That means that basically the separation gap between the observer and the content is almost zero. And in that condition, if you are able to design and provide sensorial cues in the right, consistent, and coherent way, you are able to trick your brain to believe it is something real. The virtual environment becomes real. But what does it mean? It does mean that the user is not engaged with the content only on an emotional level, just like when we watch a movie. It is the virtual content and the realism perceived by the brain is able to trigger even cognitive, motor, and physiological effects in our body. It's able to change processes like our neuroplasticity process in our brain. It's able to impact our pain perception. So I don't know if you are familiar with the quote that a mathematician is a machine that converts coffee into equations. But it's even the same for the engineer. He converts coffee into code. So basically, virtual reality is a sort of process technology solution that convert virtual stimuli into physical reactions. And in
Right.
those physical reactions, we have the reason for using virtual reality in healthcare. Because yes, we can use virtual reality to induce specific reactions that are linked to patient's experience, that are meaningful to reach the goals of a therapy.
I think it would be useful to explain to anybody watching, because we talk about neuroplasticity, and many people might be like, "What?" So I think it might be useful to explain that what's meant by that is that the brain actually physically changes its, I guess, the way it actually appears. So if you open it up, it would actually look different depending on what you've learned or whatever you've been doing, in fact. And in fact, more so than any other part of the body, if I'm correct. You can correct me on that.
Exactly.
Especially in the
and it's
elderly
similar
people,
to our
right?
muscles. Yeah, it's similar to our muscles. So basically, if you use a specific skill, if you even experience for a long of time a specific emotion, the area of the brain that is involved in that specific condition also grows. Okay, it's more stimulated than others. And that's true, for instance, for pain. So in some instances, you can overstimulate the pain of a person, so the brain area involved in pain perception can be overstimulated. So you can use virtual reality maybe to hack that process, and basically you reduce our cognitive perception of pain because pain is basically 80% cognitive and 20% physiological. So breaking that cognitive part helps, for instance, to reduce the pain perception in users, even during very painful treatments. That was also the case of Snowwork, the first pain management component developed by Hunter Hoffman, who was working with patients with poly burns in their body, and they were even not sensible to opioids for pain management. But they managed to reduce pain in a meaningful way only through virtual reality and through immersive distraction. Wow. So that's something amazing.
It's I really wish this kind of concept was something that was passed on to everybody at a young age, just as people know, like you were saying, that they can improve their muscles or whatever. If the people really knew how that works. So something that particularly piqued the interest of our editor-in-chief, Marco, was your involvement in the creation of a healing garden or a multisensorial garden called Alizea. Can you describe that for us, especially the fact that you've now made it go virtual, if I've understood correctly, so it's gone from physical to virtual?
Yes, exactly. So this is a project that is ongoing in collaboration with the Campus Biomedico in Rome and with a couple of foundations that are focused on rehabilitation of elder people, especially elder people and adult patients with fragility. So basically, let's start from the concept of healing gardens. A healing garden is a physical place, a garden, which is designed to host elder and adult patients and perform rehabilitation interventions. So basically, they can meet other patients, they can perform activities, and they can meet health operators to improve their well-being and health conditions. But obviously, during the pandemic, we had a challenge. Patients had a challenge because of social distancing, of home confinement, of lockdowns. They had not the opportunity to access these spaces. So obviously, they need to continue their care process. So how can we bridge these needs and the healing garden? So we have been asked to realize a digital twin, a virtual replica of the healing garden in virtual reality, which is obviously not the same like going outside and meet other people in a place, but it's the best compromise to allow elder patients access to rehabilitation processes, even meet other patients, because today headsets are connected, so they can be used also by health operators. So patients and health operators can meet like us now, and they can perform specific activities to ensure the accessibility, the continuity of care intervention. So this is Alizea. We are working on that. And hopefully we are going to release also this first virtual reality healing garden based on Alizea. But probably it will be adapted to very different users and target patients. It is a very interesting concept.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how do you recreate all the senses? Like you've got, vision, fine, hearing, are there other senses involved as well?
At the moment, no. At the moment, it's only audiovisual, but it's space. There is space. So you have spatial navigation, which is meaningful, and you have social connection because elder patients, especially at home, they face isolation, so they can meet their caregivers, health operators, and other patients and talk with them, which is, thanks to the meta language, is more deep, emotionally engaged than by Zoom or by Skype. So for them, it's also a way to distract them from the home space and the home environment.
Do you think we'll get new senses as well? I mean, not necessarily just in this project, but in general in immersive tech, will we get eventually? Will we have a way to simulate proper tactile feedback, haptic feedback, and also the sense of smell, for example?
There are a lot of projects on that side, a lot of haptics since the beginning of VR, but it's still challenging. I understand it's still challenging. It's a technological challenge, basically in the hardware that you use. You can still use a virtual reality headset in a smooth way, but it's still challenging to use a glow or a sweep for haptic perception. It's not so easy to be used by everyone. Especially now with the pandemic, with safety limitation. Just imagine. With glove, it's very challenging.
But one thing I can say is whenever that happens, I like the why in your use case. Because, if you use this tactile feedback to just like shoot bunch of games or, nothing against games, but it seems like sort of not wholesome enough versus like healing a human being. I love the idea of a healing garden, recreating touches and senses and just to heal individuals and human beings versus like we need to move fast and like, create a bunch of games so we could feel them more, realistic. No, I just really am going back to this wonderful woman, Priscilla. She's an Australian, and she is currently working on a bunch of these research regarding multimodal, so touch sensory type of research. And she every time you create these things, always ask about the why. Why are you recreating this type of a feature and functionality? So I love your why, Valentino. It's a wonderful concept to heal human beings. And that also goes to show that we can go beyond gaming. And so thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. We can even explore the positive impact of just a space without interactions, without gaming mechanics, just a space. And that's interesting because we collaborate with a design company that already designed the healing garden, the physical one. So they designed the healing garden based on a specific study, how to provide sensory stimuli that are useful for that target of patients. So we are working to convert all the studies in virtual reality and also to make value of the innovative tool that the patients have.
Fantastic.
So at the end of each episode, we always ask the guest to tell us what he thinks of the term singularity. Okay. Is it something concrete? Are we getting closer to your personal idea of singularity? And should we be worried about it in any way?
From my perspective, the singularity is just a name that we gave to the horizon of uncertainties that we have in our future. This is something that we share with all the past generation and probably the future generation. The difference is that now we have a shape for this horizon of uncertainty, which is technology. Probably the greatest challenges in the future and the great disruptions will come from technology. Right. But also past generation and future, they will always have a singularity. I don't have it as a risk. It depends from us, from our attitudes and from our behaviors. And I hope we will face that and we will overcome that to find new singularities more and more in the future.
Absolutely. Very solid answer. It's great because we always get a completely different answer, whoever we ask this to. And it actually gives us some insight into the way people, conceive the world and their kind of activities. So thank you for that. Also, huge thanks to my co-host, Kavya Perlman, to editor-in-chief Marco Magnano, who is over there, to the rest of the team, namely Tim Stifler-Dean, David Chavert, and Ross Newman. Follow us on Ready Hacker One. You can also find us on Facebook or YouTube under the name Singularity Watch, of course, where you can watch our shows and subscribe if you want to keep updated. Once again, we really do like to hear what you have to think, what you have to say about the episodes, if you have any thoughts and maybe some feedback on what you've seen. So feel free to leave that. Audio only is available on Spotify, Spreaker, and Apple Codcasts. I almost said on Apple Podcasts. And that's all for now. Okay, happy journeys to everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Valentino.